Insurance isn't our only passion at UFG Insurance. We're dedicated to supporting the communities where we live and work. We proudly offer our employees paid time off to volunteer. Their work is making a positive difference across the U.S. UFG's Go Beyond Award is presented to one employee annually for exceptional community service. Striving to deliver on our promises is more than what we do. It's who we are. For a company promising community support, think UFG.
Well, good morning and welcome to the session, A New Era of Volunteers, Civic Engagement, Who Will Step Up? This is part of the Gazette's Iowa Ideas Conference. I'm your moderator, Sarah Conrad-Baranowski. I'm managing editor here at the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. This session is within two tracks of the Iowa Ideas Conference, Arts and Culture and Community. We've identified it as an intersection session. That's the theme of our conference this year because so many topics intersect over several tracks. So first, I'd like to recognize our sponsors. ITC Midwest is the Iowa Ideas presenting sponsor, and sponsoring the community track is UFG Insurance. So thanks to them for making this panel and this conference possible. During our time today, we'll talk with our panelists and address audience questions. If you have a question for them, you can type it into the Q&A box and our tech host will forward it to me and I'll ask our panelists. The session is being recorded and closed captioning is available. If you have any tech questions during the session, if your audio goes out or you can't figure out how to submit a question, put those in the chat box and our tech host will answer them. So I don't want to waste too much time with introductions, so let's get started. I am joined today by four panelists. They are Erin Marie Toms, a longtime volunteer in the Cedar Rapids and Marion area, Doug Newman, Executive Director at the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance, Mickey Shields with the Iowa League of Cities, and Raymond Siddell, founder and president of Together We Achieve. So I want to start by giving each of them a chance to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about how they're connected to volunteerism and civic engagement. So we'll start with you, Doug.
All right, great. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks as well to ITC and UFG, important members of ours and great supporters of this event. The Economic Alliance does a lot of work with programs, events, initiatives, projects, and we do need a lot of volunteers in a lot of different ways for a lot of different things that we do for the community. So, pretty relevant topic for us, and I'm looking forward to the conversation this morning.
All right, Erin Marie, how about you?
Thanks for having me here today. My name is Erin Marie, and I live over in Marion with my three boys and work on the side. And so I understand the busy lives that we all are living right now, and also the importance of adding some volunteerism into that in order for it to be an enriched life, not only for our own family, our own individual people, but also for our community. So I'm pretty passionate about that and excited to join the conversation.
Okay, great. Mickey, how about you?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Mickey Shields with the Iowa League of Cities. Just real quick on the league, because not everybody knows us, although I see some familiar names on the participant list, which is good to see. The league is an association of city governments. Our members are the city governments. We have approximately 850 or 60 members out of the 940 cities in Iowa, so most of them belong. And we provide a lot of education and training and advocacy on their behalf. Volunteerism, as you could probably imagine, is really important to city governments, big and small. There's a lot of projects and programs that wouldn't be successful without volunteers stepping forward and helping out. And so that's near and dear to our members, and happy to be on this panel.
All right, and Raymond, how about you?
Good morning, everyone. Raymond Siddell, founder of Together We Achieve, and I volunteer in so many different capacities in the community as well. So volunteerism is near and dear to my heart. But as far as Together We Achieve is concerned, we're 100% volunteer nonprofit, no paid staff. So I have a very different perspective, I think, than a lot of individuals when it comes to volunteerism and the need in our communities. So thanks for having me. And like Doug said, I look forward to this conversation today.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump in with some questions that I've prepared. So in recent years, reports have indicated that volunteerism has declined, and that decline was made worse by the pandemic and then the economic struggles in recent years. So what are all of you seeing here in Iowa? Have you seen a decline either as a volunteer or within your organizations that you work? Is this a problem, and how big is it? Is it widespread? I don't know who would like to go first. You can just kind of jump in if you'd like. How about Raymond?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm a community volunteer at heart. Prior to my involvement with Together We Achieve, and over the years, it's been amazing to see the number of people that show up for all different causes in different capacities with their skill sets. And as we have hit, COVID, and of course locally the derecho, I think we're seeing a little bit of volunteer fatigue, and we're just starting to see a decrease in volunteers across the board, whether that's just individuals who would have normally showed up on a regular basis, or even those people who show up just to get some hours in for a school a requirement or work VTO, right? And so I think that whatever capacity you are involved in a volunteer role, you are seeing less individuals signing up and just less commitment from individuals in general.
And how, specifically, since your organization relies on volunteers, how have you seen that? I mean, how does that affect your organization on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so it's kind of it's one of those things where, as the need has grown in our communities through the pandemic, the economic uncertainties, we've continued to see an increase in families and households that we're serving that are facing food insecurity, for example, and with a pantry that is run by volunteers solely, the more families that we're seeing, the more we need hands on deck to restock shelves, sort donations, as well as help individuals through the pantry process. And so when we have a lack of volunteers, that causes a few different challenges for us. One, it plays into the efficiencies when we're trying to help individuals in a manner that is quick and caters to their schedules and their needs. But also it impacts our ability to open for the safety of our volunteers and for the sake of having a process and being able to follow through with it. We have some internal requirements of the number of volunteers that we have to have in the facility. And if we don't have that many, we unfortunately have to close unexpectedly that day. And so we have seen that more recently, especially through the summer months. We saw that quite a bit, but we are seeing that a little bit more frequently, that we just don't have enough people signing up. And our number is only 3. So if that says anything at all, our number is 3 volunteers in a day that we need to open our doors. If we don't have those 3 individuals, unfortunately, for the safety and the process that we have in place, we cannot move forward that day with opening.
Others, how have you seen volunteerism change in recent years?
I guess I would chime in a little bit on there's some big differences, and I know we'll get into them in this conversation. When I think about recruiting people to a board or a committee where you're asking for, a 3-year commitment to board service, has a very different flavor than asking somebody to come volunteer for the downtown farmers market, right? We need you for 5 hours. So there is, there are some very different, I think, recruiting strategies, and maybe that's even, maybe even the decline of volunteerism. I mean, I trust the numbers and certainly boots on the ground people like Raymond, what their experience has been. There are some things that we do that we're doing really well at too. So I'm a little bit maybe just interested in what that, whether that's a nationwide or statewide number, because it depends specifically on what you're talking about. It is hard. I think board development is really hard. I know we'll hear from Mickey here about convincing people to run for elected office. But there are pockets, leadership for 5 seasons, downtown farmers market, where I think there's still a great enthusiasm for coming out and pitching in to these one-time events.
Okay. Yeah. Mickey, I think you were going to say something. Yeah.
Right. Well, actually, yeah, Doug hit the nail on the head. Our members, they talk a lot about seeing a decline in probably what you'd consider to be traditional volunteering, where they seek volunteers to serve on like the Planning and Zoning Commission, the library board, let alone the more formal offices like mayor and city council. And that's certainly an issue. And we're seeing that across the state. We're hearing a lot from our members about that. At the same time, there's still some members who are having great success getting volunteers to turn out for what I call more project-based volunteer efforts, like an event, we're just going to clean up a creek today, something like clean up a park, like it's just a one-off kind of thing. They seem to get better numbers, more traditional numbers anyways for that. The ones where they seem to be struggling are those longer-term commitments. And that's where we're facing some issues among our cities out there.
All right.
Yeah, my thoughts are actually twofold. Number one, in the short term, we talk about there being a big change since COVID. And I think that, yes, I think everything's changed since COVID. People have trouble, getting out of their house even, and there's still fear and discomfort, and so with that, there's a little bit of inertia, volunteering inertia, right? We were in it, we were doing great for a while, and then life was cut off. And to get that momentum back takes a lot of extra effort. We're seeing that in all realms, and volunteering is definitely one of them. And then secondly, on a long-term basis, we've seen volunteering in the US decline over the last 20 years. A lot of this might be generationally impacted, right? We have our whole landscape has changed. We have less religious people and religions and churches do a lot of volunteer efforts within our community. We have family dynamics are changing a lot in the last 20 years. And then also we have more people out of the workplace, and you think that would allow them to have more time. But when we have more people out of the workplace in terms of retirees, you have things like health issues that come up that prevent short-term and long-term involvement in volunteering. And so those are all dynamics that we need to consider when picking our projects and creating projects for volunteerism. Like, it may be reflective of what Mickey just said of we're having challenges with long-term commitments, but short-term commitments aren't so bad. So being able to redesign that for our current volunteer efforts to gain people out of that inertia, it might be the way to build something new.
Yeah. Well, that kind of it leads a little bit in, and some of you have touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to talk about volunteer fatigue and, the people who get asked. It's like once you raise your hand and say, I'd like to volunteer, sometimes you might be the one that gets called on all the time, or, you're trying to think of a new board member for a group and, so-and-so always serves on boards. Is that a concern either if your organization is recruiting volunteers? Do you keep that in mind? Or as a volunteer yourself, have you felt that fatigue? Do you feel guilty if you say no to something? Any one of you can jump in if you'd like.
I just feel on the front when it comes to, I'm going to speak from a different perspective. I'm going to speak from the perspective of being a volunteer for a second. Of course, as Together We Achieve and recruiting volunteers, we're constantly sending to the same database of people that have already signed up, right? We're like, oh, we need help. These are the days we need help. But as a volunteer, I think that I'm a little bit more privy to the opportunities that are out there. And so when I see something come across the desk, whether that's an email blast or just a one-off request off of social media, I'm a little bit more inclined to feel guilty if I don't say yes, or if I don't find a way to find other people to help out that organization or that cause. Just because from my perspective as an organization operator, I know what it's like to need those volunteers and what those hands on deck mean for that organization and that cause, and for the constituents, the individuals who are going to benefit from the services that are being provided by that organization, that event, that fundraiser. It's just key that those that are in the volunteer community, whether or not we feel guilty, I don't know that we should, but I'm sure there's a little bit of that in all of us. But I think we all do feel an obligation to at least attempt to help recruit for other organizations or causes or events, just because we are on the inside on the regular and understand both sides of that. So, yeah.
I've got two quick thoughts on that. First of all, on the event side of things, I think it's really important that when you do have a volunteer there, that you use them and use them in valuable ways. I mean, we always say that the worst thing you can do is get somebody to sign up for helping at a downtown farmers market, and then they spend a couple hours standing around. If people have volunteered, they want to work, right? They want to dig in. They want to do something meaningful and purposeful. So it's really on us as the organizations that are utilizing these volunteers to make sure that we give them an experience, and that there's two-way value. We value the volunteer, but the volunteer also winds up with an experience. we also, I think, trying to set up systems where, this thing about you're always going back to the same people. We have innovation councils at the Economic Alliance, one for economic development, one for community development, one for business support. And we actually have a rule that no one business can have a position on more than one of those councils. So it guarantees that we're using 75 different companies in town to fill those 75 seats, 25 on each of those innovation councils. So sometimes you have to sort of set up some rules to make sure that you don't fall into that trap of like, oh yeah, I asked Roger for everything, I'll just get him on this committee as well. So we sort of almost set up some parameters to make sure that we're doing the work on the front end, to dig into more volunteers, to different kinds of people, making sure that those boards are diverse.
Mickey,
Do you
I'm
have
a little
training for volunteers
sorry.
so that they can learn to say no, like that they can learn to say, I'm on one already? Because, I think that's part of it too, is volunteers, back to the guilty part, they feel like I should be there, I can show up, I'm capable. So that's cool that you guys have those expectations or those limitations in place to spread that out.
Or if any of you as volunteers yourself have advice about how to prioritize what you're asked to do, and how do you choose when, you want to give your time to all these organizations and you see a need, how do you say no?
Yeah, I think you get bit in the butt a couple times real bad. You hopefully learn your lesson. At least that's what happened for me. I think the ones that I commit to the most are the ones that associate the why, the bigger picture. And if I feel very connected to that why, then it's super easy for me to rally around it. And when I'm asking other people to be a volunteer, I try and make it halfway work, halfway fun. So there's maybe a social event when I gather a few friends in to help out with an event. We work on the event for a couple hours, and then we go out to supper, or we go have some drinks, or whatever that might look like. And so I only take on the things that I know I can fully commit to. And even then, I think sometimes I'm spread too thin, but I feel so good about the things I do that the energy is well worth it. And then, you bring people along with you to let them dip their toe in the water and talk them through it. If this isn't something that you are going to really love, then find something that is.
Yeah. Mickey, I wondered about you from the League of Cities perspective. I used to live and work in a small town, and I would see somebody run for city council and serve there for a couple of terms. And then they'd say, I need to take a step back. And then somebody would convince them to run for school board because, you're a great representative. So do you see that among the member cities with the League of Cities? Are they having trouble recruiting people to run for office?
Yeah, all of this is definitely relevant. I hear stories constantly about the same group of 5 or 6 people serve on everything. Especially in our smaller communities where you just have fewer people to pull from to begin with. But there's also, I think, something that we all fall into. The League of Cities is no different. You kind of tap into the same folks who express some interest, and they do a good job with this other group or this other project. And then you're scrambling for somebody to run for this or serve on that or join this thing. And you say, what about those 2 people? They did a good job with that. And it's like we all fall for that trap. And cities are certainly no different. To get to your other question about what we're seeing on elective office, boards and commissions, without a doubt. And that's probably the most visible thing for our membership is when there's an upcoming election here, just a few weeks away for city elections. Mm-hmm. And undoubtedly, there will be a whole bunch of uncontested races. There will also be a whole bunch of seats that have no one put their name forward to nominate themselves to be elected to the city council, and that has definitely grown in the last several years. It's been an issue probably more in small town Iowa. In my career here at the League of Cities for 15 years, hear it more from the smaller communities, but in the last couple cycles, starting to see it more with our medium to larger cities, where frankly probably expect more healthy competition just because there's more people in the community to potentially run for office, but it's starting to kind of creep up into those larger communities as well. And then the boards and commissions, that's probably even more of a difficult situation, just getting someone to serve on the planning and zoning commission, the library boards, the park boards, and on and on and on. And there a lot of communities just go with vacancies because they just cannot get somebody to say yes to fill out different boards and commission seats.
We were talking before this started a little bit about what the league is doing to try to, I don't want to say promote government, but can you talk a little bit about the PR campaign, basically, that the League of Cities is kind of starting to roll out and engage with citizens?
Yeah, thanks for the free plug. Yeah, so our board is definitely aware of this. And I think part of it is also the negativity that you see, at least their experience at the local level, and trying to combat some of this, I don't know, negativity, criticism that may be unjust in some fashion, and just trying to boost like awareness and education of what cities provide every day, in the hopes that better understanding will lead to better conversations and perhaps even more folks willing to serve. And so it's called Simplicity. And there's 4 videos that our friends in Cedar Rapids, a marketing firm called De Novo, put out for us. And we continue to work with them on this kind of next phase. We're going to help our members do storytelling. City governments, as you can imagine, they don't really have marketing firms or marketing staff. They don't really sell themselves as a governmental entity. And so that's part of the thing that we're trying to encourage them to do, is talk about their successes, talk about the value of their services that they provide to their citizens and businesses every single day, many of which probably get taken for granted. And so I think the ultimate goal is, again, that if we can build some better understanding, maybe some more support at the local level, and then eventually perhaps more people willing to serve.
Yeah. So we've kind of transitioned from here's what the problem is to Mickey talking about trying to solve that problem and get more people interested. What are other organizations doing, or what could they be doing? Or even, I mean, people in the community. I'm going to make this a really broad question here, which we can, dissect any way we want to. But how do we solve this problem? How do we promote what opportunities there are to volunteer? If you're someone who lives in a community and you're maybe watching this panel and want to get involved, how do you do that? I think, Doug, you had some ideas.
Yeah, I'll give 2 quick examples, and really just shout outs to other organizations. And one of these is going to feel like I'm playing to the audience today, but let me start with the other one. First of all, United Way does just a tremendous job of marshaling resources, and that there's incredible stories around how they coordinated volunteers in the face of disaster recovery, right? Derecho, floods, things like that. But even just on the, to your question about if I'm new to town, how do I get plugged in? United Way and their Volunteer Now service. I know that's here for the East Central Iowa United Way, but I'm assuming maybe United Ways across Iowa have similar things. I just happened to look up the numbers on this. I wouldn't know these off the top of my head, but they connected 2,600 volunteers to 67,000 hours of volunteer service. Like, that's where we would send somebody if they're like, how do I get plugged in? So shout out to United Way and their big role in connecting volunteers to opportunities. By the way, the flip side of that is true too. If you have a need, if you're a human service agency or have a need for volunteers, they're kind of the matchmaking service. The other one that you'll laugh at, but in all seriousness, read your daily newspaper. The Gazette, or whatever your daily newspaper is in the town that you're tuning in from today, is an incredible resource for information about the community, including volunteer opportunities. And sometimes there'll be stories in there that it may not say, volunteer here and now, but you're reading a great story about Indian Creek Nature Center and what they were able to do with trail cleanup or some project, and you're like, oh, there must have been dozens of volunteers involved in that. So it can spur ideas as well. So that's great advice for beyond volunteerism. If you want to get plugged into a community and you're new to a community, subscribe to the newspaper and start reading.
The check is in the mail, Doug. But no, really, if you live in a community, a small community that doesn't have a local newspaper, I would say, connecting with your city hall, or if you do have a chamber or something, trying to find those organizations where you can connect with the organizations. Others, I don't know if you have advice also.
My thought is you go where people gather, right? You have businesses and organizations that you're there, you're meant to connect with your team, your organization, a bigger purpose. Why not implement opportunities to do that within your workplace? The second thing I think about is schools. If we're bringing up a generation of volunteering, if we combat the inertia right from the get-go and expose young people to opportunities to serve our community, to get that awesome karma kickback of feeling good about what you do, we could help get rid of the inertia and also infuse that mindset. And then the third place is the home. If you volunteer, take your kids. If your kids volunteer, you go too. Support it any way, shape, or form. So those three big places are the ones where I think volunteerism really becomes less of an activity and more of a mindset.
Raymond, I think you were going to. Oh, go ahead, Mickey.
No, one thing I would add, and I don't want to step on one of your next questions, but especially from an organizational view that we often share with cities, is to connect with Volunteer Iowa at the state level. They have a lot of resources to help organize a volunteer program. If you've never done that before, if you're kind of new at it, you don't really know how to recruit people, don't know how to manage them well. And part of the training we also do with our own cities is treat volunteers like your staff members. You better have an orientation process. You better give them proper training and safety equipment, whatever is needed. Kind of depends on the project, of course, or the event, whatever they're doing. But treat it seriously. I think Doug alluded to before, like the scenario that nobody wants, especially as a volunteer. You've already given up your time, and I show up and it's disorganized. There's nothing for me to do, and yet it's kind of chaotic. Like what's going on here? And we've all probably experienced that. So if you're going to ask for volunteers, you got to be ready. You got to treat it like it's a real work event. You're going to invest your time in it. You're going to treat these people well. And then the other thing too, that this is something some again, city governments are kind of limited in how much they can do and money they can spend, but try to reward them in some fashion. Give them some kind of thank you from the mayor, or whoever's, kind of the big wig in town or who's in charge of this event. Send a press release to the local paper, put it on your city website, have the mayor say something at the next council meeting, do, all the above, do something that just at least gives them recognition. I think all of us probably understand that most volunteers, they're volunteering. They're not looking for anything more than to try to help out. And they want to be part of something and feel that feeling of fulfillment. They're not looking for monetary anything typically, but they want to be thanked and they want to be recognized for giving up some time and stepping forward. And that's something that I think is absolutely critical. So again, from the organizational perspective, I would try to look at it like, plan this out, be smart, and there's people out there that can help you.
Yeah. We have received a couple of questions from people who are watching the panel. The first one is primarily for Raymond, but anyone can answer. The question was, as a completely volunteer organization, how does a small organization stand out among all the larger groups who have more visibility, both for promoting opportunities as well as any preconception of it being of more value to volunteer for a more prominent or larger organization? So how do you stand out when there are so many groups competing for volunteers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think just so everybody on this in this session understands, I'm also taking notes from these amazing panelists that I get to surround myself with today. I've heard some great things that I'll be able to take back and implement, or at least research in different ways. And so, when we are looking for volunteers, we are asking, are people who have signed up in the past. We're going back to our list, but we do reach out on social. We're reaching out on. We have a newsletter. We ask our constituents to, if they can't volunteer, do they know somebody that can? So that the households that we're serving. But I think early on, we did a lot of press releases. We had some opportunities where we brought in groups of people, schools, businesses. And so from that, we have gained some tried and true, very dedicated volunteers that come back on a regular basis. The hardest part is keeping up with that as a volunteer only organization. We don't have a staff member. We don't have a volunteer coordinator or recruiter. And so keeping up on that and following up with businesses or reaching out to new businesses to say, hey, we have this group opportunity, come do a team building activity with us. And typically that's going to lead to 1 or 2 volunteers out of that as well. So, we did some great things early on. We had obviously a lot of community support with how we came about, but we've continued to be able to capitalize on some of that as well. If any of you have heard me on the news or heard me in different settings, I've always said, whether it's kids or food insecurity or animals or the elderly, find something that you're passionate about, because there's an organization in our community that is serving just about every cause out there. And there's an opportunity for you to get involved. And so I think with what we're doing specifically with food insecurity, we have also tailored to that passion for some individuals who food insecurity is something that is near and dear to their heart. They want to give back to that in any way that they can. And sometimes that's volunteering at the pantry, that's picking up donations, or a variety of other tasks that we have needs or that we have to do, and we have a need for volunteers to do. And so that's one way that we stand out, is of course being very specific in what we're doing, what we're offering, and the tasks that we have, so that they cater to individuals and their skill sets and their passion, but also just trying to put ourselves out there in different capacities to draw the attention of anybody who's looking to volunteer. Unfortunately, if I had staff like some of these large organizations, I'd probably be able to go out there and do a little bit more pounding of the ground to get indoors and things like that. But unfortunately, we don't have that. So we've really had to rely on a little bit more passive communication and experience. But I think overall what we've experienced is just that volunteer fatigue, which we started off the conversation with. And even people who would give any day of the week, they're stepping back. They're saying, I need a year off. I need some time for myself. And I don't think any of us can blame them with all the mental health stuff that's going on in our communities. We need people to take care of themselves first. You cannot take care of other people until, you're taken care of. So we have to keep that in mind too. And that's one thing that we talk about a lot in our organization, is ensuring that those that we're asking are not just saying yes because they feel guilty or because they know that if they don't, we have to close that day.
Well, and to the issue, part of the question being about the preconception that it's more valuable to volunteer for a larger group, I would think the volunteers that Together We Achieve, if you're one of 3 people that's needed to open it, I mean, you're a vital part of that organization on that day. And gosh, that must feel pretty good to be giving your time and know that, I mean, like Doug's example of showing up at an event and you're just standing around, you're probably not doing that at Together We Achieve when you show up.
No. So yeah, that's a good point. Anybody that comes to Together We Achieve to volunteer, I do apologize. You're not going to stand around. I am going to have a lot for you to do. And even if there's 10 of us there in a day, there's so much to do. We have 18,000 square feet. So that's a lot of, maintaining, but also we're serving hundreds of families a week. So there's just a lot to do, and opportunity for us. And I know so many organizations in our community with the growing need are experiencing that as well.
Some of the small organizations like yours, Raymond, the story, your origin story is so cool, right? Like that's what you have over some of the larger organizations with these bigger missions or more traditional missions. I always think about, and we have a pretty close connection with our with our former colleague Jesse Thoming here, but that Iowa Giving Crew and the story of their origin is just so funny, and it's so awesome. And now they've gone on to really establish this meal giveaway at Thanksgiving time. Tiny little crew. You guys came together originally, Raymond, in the disaster. I mean, your origin story is incredible, and you definitely, hopefully, that resonates with people even these many years later.
Yeah. We had another question also from someone who's watching. They said, I'm a volunteer representative for a group of volunteer gardeners who range in age from 20 to 90. And I want to look for better ways to keep them showing up and keep them up to date on what they need to know. We have folks who are very tech savvy, but some who struggle with email. Is there a good balance or some tools you could share to help people engage across generations and age groups?
I would say that
That's a
our
great
organization, we're very intentional with, we send out, newsletters and emails regarding volunteer needs and social. But, especially for our existing volunteers who have volunteered with us one time or 20 times, we try to post the same thing that we're posting online in the facility itself, whatever those volunteer needs are, what's upcoming, so that anybody that's there, maybe they don't want to go look in an email, maybe they don't want to go look on social. But for our less tech savvy individuals, that has actually helped out a lot, because they're able to take a picture of it on their phone, take it with them. We'll make a copy of it, or they put it in their calendar while they're there. They say, oh, this is an upcoming need for this organization that I'm already volunteering with. So it is hard, because we talk about that in our organization as well. As, are we hitting everybody? Are we making sure that we're getting out to everyone that we can? If we're just posting on social? The answer is no, but it's the easiest, it's the fastest, it's the most affordable, right? Typically to do it that way. So I think just making sure that you're diversifying your medium in which you are trying to connect with individuals, even if they are existing, making sure before they leave that volunteer opportunity that day, they're aware of what's next, what the next need is, how they can still be involved, and where you'll need help, even if it's a totally different project. They want to know what your organization has going on.
Other thoughts about making sure you are communicating in ways that everyone can access?
Sure. Yeah. And this is something, it kind of goes back to the last question too. I mean, most of the cities in Iowa are very small. In fact, I think I have my numbers right. There's 500 cities that are less than 500 in population. And so Iowa is obviously a rural state and made up of quite a few smaller communities. And that's most of who we work with at the League of Cities. And they have definitely that cross-generational issue in all sorts of ways, where there's a lot of elderly residents in town, but of course some younger families. And so and that comes up in different ways, of course, and how cities plan out their communities and provide services. In this context, it's a challenge in some fashion, but there's also some weirdly unique ways that it almost brings people together, different generations together in a pretty cool way. But I think the probably the best thing that I see done is they just still do a lot of like word of mouth. They get out and kind of beat the streets. The mayor and council just do some old fashioned door knocking and just ask. They just try to meet people at their level, with the understanding that if it's an elderly resident, they may not get our Facebook alert, or an email blast or a text alert, anything like that. And so that's part of like just their kind of general understanding. They got to try to communicate with people in different ways.
Yeah. I want to build off of that a little bit. How do we get out? I'm trying to phrase this question properly. How do we get multi-generational volunteers? How do we engage people who are maybe from different marginalized communities or different socioeconomic backgrounds? How do we broaden our volunteer base so we're not going back to the same people, or so that, the example of social media and saying, well, we let everyone know on Facebook. Well, not everyone uses Facebook. So how do we reach different communities or pockets of people who are not using the communication that we might be using? Anybody can jump right in.
Got to get on that blowhorn. I mean,
Yeah.
I've done press releases, I've done calls on Facebook, and then, the media will reach out and ask how they can help share our story, our need. I think it just goes back to using every possible form of communication. I love the word of mouth. I actually had 2 volunteers in Together We Achieve the other day, working the pantry. We have a coat drive going on right now and a distribution that will come up. And one volunteer said to the other, "Hey, did you sign up to help sort clothing for the cold weather gear that's coming up?" And they're like, "Oh, I didn't know anything about it." And so through that experience, we had 2 additional volunteers that were there for the pantry that signed up. And so I think the word of mouth is great, but I think you just have to continue to use every form of media that's out there, because people are watching in different ways, and they understand in different ways, they receive in different ways, and the more that you can do is going to, I think, provide.
Depending on the opportunity here too, again, we're talking about sort of a really broad range of volunteerism, but I think when you talk about board development, committee representation, then especially the diversity and that you've crossed all sectors is so important. It takes it's exhaustive. It takes a lot of one-on-one. This is on that end of it, this is a lot of 1-hour cups of coffee to explain the opportunity and to explain the requirements of serving on this board or this innovation council. But I think that's important work, and it's worth the time that you invest in it. And you're just, the all call general notice just isn't going to do it on that end of the volunteerism spectrum. You have to go out there and do the one-on-one work and say, I'm going to try to get this person, and this person. And I know it's probably going to take me at least 3 hours, an hour with each, to get them committed to this assignment.
Thanks for pointing that out, Doug, because we've talked so much about how do you give your time, for a coat drive, but board development, I think, is probably a whole different beast that, recruiting for that and developing people to serve in those roles. I also wanted to go back to Erin Marie. You made a point earlier about taking your kids along. And I wanted to spend at least a couple of minutes talking about developing that passion for volunteerism in younger people. I think someone earlier mentioned, we have high school programs that require students to volunteer, but what else can we do to be engaging people at a younger age so that they grow up with this idea that volunteering is worth their time and something that they are passionate about?
Yeah. Well, first, let me share with you the coolest thing that happened a couple of days ago. I have 3 boys, and my oldest just started football at his high school, and they got rained out from some pregame carb loading supper, and it was supposed to be outdoors. And because of the weather, a local retirement home invited them in to use their eating space on a whim, and allowed them to come. Gosh, they're right after practice, stinky football players, freshmen. So I just know from my view of a freshman boy, they are not maybe the most polite or sensitive and all those great things. And my kiddo, Declan, came home and just said, we had the most amazing afternoon. We had this practice, and it was really hard, and it started raining. And so this retirement home right up the street that I never even knew existed came, and we got to eat there, and the residents came in, and they kept peeking their head in and chatting with us. And then they gave us a bell concert, and some guy brought out bags, and I started playing bags with this old dude who was awesome. I never knew a guy with the name of Clive, and he was just going on and on. It was probably the most my 14-year-old son had talked to me in weeks, because he was so excited about going to a retirement home. And so because of that, I was so thrilled about the coaches who have been really good about integrating community into our program, about, this is a give and take. Our community gives to us so that you can play football. So what are you going to do to give back? And he integrated that message really well that night, to the point that Dex is finding a way to say, hey, they need some help with this fall fest. Me and a couple of the players are going to go back. And when we talk about diversity and multi-generational, a lot of the ways I think we integrate and make somewhat even at one point in their life is in high school. I mean, the guys that Declan's going to bring along, one is a refugee from Congo, right? He's going to come and maybe do his first event ever, volunteerism. And then another kiddo is someone that I'm not sure he's been too much involved either, from the questions that he was asking, like, well, what do you do? How do you show up? Do I have to pay money to volunteer? What is this all about? And so what a cool integration of this is the value. This is how it makes you feel. This is your responsibility as a citizen within this community, because they give to you, and it's an opportunity to give back. So I just thought that was the coolest thing that had just recently happened when it talks about multi-generational and how do you bring the family in. And I just had to share that. So
Thank
Sarah,
you.
what else did you want me to highlight? Oh, the other thing about bringing in kids. That's right. So that was just something I didn't even do. Thankfully, my community engaged my kids, and I'm super grateful. I think there's a ton of opportunity. We always try and create things for kids to do after school. Gosh, like find something that we can have kids do after school that makes them feel amazing and adds value to the community and themselves, right? The other thing when we talk about this happening within the family, I was raised by a social worker mom who we were always doing everything. And my dad wasn't. He was raised Catholic, and we didn't have a Catholic church in our little itty bitty town. This wasn't in Iowa. But my mom said, well, you can be an elder in our Presbyterian church that we go to every week. And he's like, I can't do that. I'm Catholic. And she said, yes, you can do that. You love God. You can go and be an elder in a non-Catholic church. And he did. And he served right up until he passed away. And he said it was one of the most fulfilling things he'd ever done. And so having those arguments in front of us, but also the getting to see the repercussion of that, definitely embedded it in all three of us kids. And I have the honor of sitting on a board in town that gets to work with very young families. And we have a parent night on once a week on Thursday nights, where we get to bring in, and the parents bring in their kids. We watch their kids while they get to go to class and learn new parenting skills, new mental health skills, new living skills, all sorts of things for a lot of different groups. And we have an Afghan group, we have a Latino group, we have all sorts of different groups that we try and cater to. And I only go once a quarter. I'm on the board, and that's kind of your responsibility, which I love. It puts you really, really close to the mission. But I always bring one of my three boys, and the conversation afterwards is really rich. The dragging them away from the football game on the lawn or whatever else is a little bit painful at first, but boy, the conversation afterwards is awesome. And it's a pretty impactful thing. It's part of your family culture that you can create, and that we're also, as parents, responsible for. We're responsible for embedding this, as well as good sleep habits, good tech habits, good nutrition habits, all those other things. What's your good volunteerism effort that you're going to commit to?
Thank you
I think
for
one thing
sharing
that
this. Go ahead.
I think one thing that Erin Marie, just I'm a parent as well, and so anything that comes from the parent, right? It's just more work. It's a chore. It's one more thing you're asking me to do or telling me that I have to do. And so I think when you talk about the coach or the community in some capacity, getting the youth involved and showing them the value, especially in a team environment, because they can then carry that into their individual life, right? Like into their, you know what, I like that, and maybe my friends did it, but I'm still going to go do it type thing. I'm going to go volunteer or figure out a way to give back. So I think that is really cool. And one thing that hopefully community members in general can try to capitalize on at some point is, yes, parents do have an obligation to teach a lot of things to their children, but if we can, as a community, share the importance of giving back to our community that we're receiving so much from, I think that's an amazing opportunity for the youth to get involved. We see youth with their parents in our pantry volunteering, and they're just amazed at the amount of food that goes out the door. They're amazed at how many people are thanking them for this food that, they're used to going to the grocery store to pick up. And so this is a whole new concept for them to see. And I'm grateful for all the parents that bring in their youth to volunteer, because it does give them a different perspective. But I think it does also put them on that path to figure out how to give back and be an active participant in the volunteer community.
I think there's not always immediate gratification on that, right? You got to hope that someday they're like, oh yeah, I get that. And I think about myself. I mean, my parents ran the small town little league program, and I don't think I had any understanding of the hours that took, or why they did it instead of any of the other hundreds of parents who could have done it. And I was probably like 40 years old when I woke up one day and like, man, that was a big effort on their part. So there may not be immediate gratification from your kids about these lessons you're trying to impart, but maybe someday it clicks.
Yeah. Or even just talking with them about why you volunteer, I would think, and what you get out of it. Mickey, I don't know if I cut you off there.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I mean, I'm also taking notes like Raymond for both our two kids and what cities could do. But I think that is the key. You got to find ways to involve youth in some fashion. Obviously, connecting with local schools is a great way of doing that. And city governments, I know some of them do a very good job of that and have ongoing projects and programs with area youth. And of course, a lot of cities host youth with like youth programming, sports, different things of that nature. So they have ways to connect. But I think to making it fun and making it rewarding, that's a bigger challenge probably with the kids out there, and making it help them see the purpose behind it is maybe more challenging than an adult. But at the same time, like Erin Marie talked about, kids can also give you immediate feedback, and good or bad, and that's invaluable for any effort.
We've talked about, I think, Erin Marie, you referenced finding your passion, and that there's some sort of volunteer. Someone mentioned this, that how do you, if you don't know what your passion is, how do you figure that out? Do you just go out and start volunteering? Do you go and interview organizations? Like, how do you find the place where it's going to click for you?
Yeah. Well, and just to round back, number one, if you bring your kids to volunteer and they're bitter about it, even at the end, Dairy Queen helps, just to let you know it happens. And number two, Doug, I'm in the same boat. I didn't appreciate any of the stuff my parents did. We always got drug along, and I was voluntold, right? And that was okay, because when I bounced all over the Midwest, and I'm from one coast and I lived in the South. I had no relatives for within 2,000 miles when I first came to Iowa, and I didn't know what to do. I was really, really lonely. I mean, I had a great workplace, but they were like 5 o'clock, see you till Monday. And it was really, really lonely. So what do? You show up and you help. That's what you learn when you grow up in those households. And that's how I got infused into the community really, really quickly. How I found all my initial friends, and they introduced me to their friends. And this happened several times with several different communities, that you just show up and you help, and it integrates you quicker. It announces you quicker. So that's what I just wanted to round back on. And so Sarah, back to your question, how do you pick? How do you choose, right? Well, like I said, I used to say yes to everything because it was an opportunity. And then I learned a couple hard lessons about if you don't say no to anything and yes to everything, you lose yourself, right? And it's not fun anymore. And you really should make this something your heart wants to go. And so you asked on everything if you show up, and you get put on that list, and people can rely on you a few times. And so they're going to keep asking. But honestly, if you keep asking the same person, then you, like Raymond's maybe experiencing, you get fatigued, you get really tired, and to the point where you just want to help and help and help until you wear out. So diversifying your volunteer list, or even asking those people, hey, I know that you really enjoy this. Who else do you think that in your circle would really enjoy this? Where you can make this more even a social thing that allows you to connect with other friends that you may fall off the radar with, right? And then in choosing, my career as a volunteer has really changed based on what pops up, what's the hot topic. When we have Afghan refugees in our community and you hear about the need of being able to help these folks who've been through so much acclimate really quickly, that became a real big passion for a short amount of time until you know that they're in a good spot, till you feel safe about it. I always lap onto whatever my kids are really into. I did all the little sports, blast ball, t-ball, 5-year-old basketball, and then all of a sudden my kids got better than me, right? So you give until you're not the best person to give. And that's when my husband got to take over. When my kids can make more baskets and knew more about soccer than me, then yeah, I no longer am the coach. So but oftentimes you also know your role. Like, do they need somebody just to show up and hand out headbands and bring Band-Aids, right? And what's going to be my personal reward? Sometimes folks look extrinsically of what value I can bring other people, which is important. But also, in order to really analyze, is this going to wear me out? You got to look internally of how is this going to impact how I feel about going every time? Am I going to be excited? Am I going to be able to bring my kids along to help them understand the importance of this? Am I going to be able to help someone else, which of course is important, but if you don't take a good look at yourself and how you're reacting to this opportunity, it could be a long-term effect of how you're really going to be able to give.
We are getting close to the end, and I really did want to ask my last planned question because I wanted, and some of you have already talked about it, but if you could talk about a volunteer experience you've had and what you got out of it, because I think it's really valuable to hear other people's experiences and understand all these opportunities that are out there. And so I'm not pulling this out of the blue. Like I told you all I was going to ask this. So if you could talk, maybe it's your first volunteer experience or something that just stands out as like, this is the story you would tell someone if they asked, what is it like to be a volunteer? Doug, we'll start with you.
I'll try to keep this quick. I know we're short on time, but quick little plug for Leadership for 5 Seasons. Our community leadership program. I went through the program 23 years ago, long before I ever imagined I'd be leading the organization responsible for that. But I went through and felt compelled to volunteer. A lot of times we talk about, find your passion, find something that you're really involved in. For me, that very first volunteer experience here in Cedar Rapids was exactly the opposite of that. I felt compelled through LFS to volunteer for something. And I basically just said, what should I do? And I got introduced to the ARC of East Central Iowa, a marvelous, wonderful organization that provides services to developmentally disabled families. And I didn't have I wasn't affected by anything, but I just jumped into the organization and really found a home there. I wound up spending 10 years on the board as really one of my first big volunteer things here in Cedar Rapids. So shout out for LFS and the fact that we, I think, really do a good job of trying to compel people to be leaders in volunteerism.
All right. Anybody else have an idea or an experience they want to share?
Well, piggybacking on Erin Marie's talk about bringing the kids along, we do that occasionally with our children, and at least a couple of times a year. And we've done different things, but one of them was helping clean out a homeless shelter. Another one was a local nonprofit here that does charitable work called Urban Dreams, was moving offices. We helped with that process last year. And of course, our kids right now, they're 9 and 11. At the time, I think they were 10 and 8, and this was on a Saturday morning in the middle of the winter. They weren't exactly happy to start out, but by the end of the day, they were energetic. They were happy. You could see the light going on. And so, as a parent, but also as a member of this community, it felt really gratifying that we helped out with the project, of course, but also that you could see that maybe our kids are starting to understand why we're doing these things, why it's important to mom and dad and important to the community.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I would let, I'm sorry, I have to cut you off. I'm so sorry. 9:29, they're going to make me end this. I have so enjoyed this conversation. I think it was wonderful. I'm relatively new to Cedar Rapids again. I grew up here, but I came back a year ago, and I'm myself looking for ways to get involved. So it's very helpful for me to hear all of this too. So I want to thank the panelists for making the time to come on here and share their experiences and talk about this important topic. You brought valuable insight to the issue, and I hope you've inspired people to volunteer. Thank you also to our audience for these great questions and for your attention during this session. And finally, ITC Midwest and UFG Insurance for sponsoring the Iowa Ideas Conference and this session. We could not do it without them. The next sessions will begin at 9:40. And so you can go to iowaideas.com and find a full buffet of options to choose from, everything from healthcare and education to economic development and community. So thank you again. I have so appreciated your time and this conversation. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.